Okay, so this is Al Dewitt. He is the Academic Chair of Metals Processing. Al has been in this role or a similar role for about 16 years. His experience and expertise includes all of the welding and metal fabrication programs, machinist, CNC, and welding tech. So with that, I'll let Al take it away, and I'll be turning off my camera and my mic. Remember, if you have any questions, type them in the chat. I'll see them, and we'll get your questions answered for you. Go ahead, Al.
Okay, that's great. So welcome everybody. It's going to be hopefully an interesting evening session. You're obviously all here because you're interested in some sort of career or some kind of educational program that's related to metals processing. Well, that certainly would be me. So the role I have as an academic chair means that I would handle programs all around the province, which would include welding fabricator programs through Miramichi, Woodstock, steel fabrication programs in St. John and Moncton, welding programs in Moncton and St. John and St. Andrews, machining in Moncton and in St. John, CNC machining in Moncton, and welding engineering technology in Moncton as well, which is kind of a neat 2-year program that we'll talk a little bit about. It's a pretty special deal. Actually, they're all pretty good. So my plan for this evening's little webinar is I plan to take you through a little bit of information first. I want to sort of bring up a couple of videos that will help you see what our students actually do inside of their programs, and I do have a couple of testimonials from a couple of our employers that are pretty interesting. We are certainly the supplier of metals processing related staff or workers for the province of New Brunswick, and certainly a lot wider. So it's a pretty interesting field to be in. So first things first, well, actually, then what I'm going to do is throw up one of those boring PowerPoint presentations, but I'm not going to go through it with you in the same way. I'm just going to throw up a little bit of information on each program and discuss it a bit. And if you really want to ask questions through that period, just use the use the chat. And at the end of what I'm going to do, which is probably 15-20 minutes, then we're going to open it wide open. And if you have any question about anything except your love life, I'll try and answer it. So what I'll be really interested in knowing is what each of you want to actually do. And then I can maybe focus in a little bit more on those particular experiences. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually throw a video up here. I'm just going to share my screen with you, and we will try and get this to work. I'm no technical crazy person here, but we'll get this to go, I think. Just get my drop box up. So this first video is a very short 1:30 presentation on our steel fabrication and our welding programs at NBCC. And we'll just see this thing's coming up slowly. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. Oh, it seems to be. So this should take you through a little bit of one of our shop experiences that we have. And for some reason, this drop box isn't coming up. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this is a steel on our, as I said, on our steel fabrication program, and gives you a little bit of insight into student experience here. Okay, hopefully we're back. So that was a little video that really represents what we do inside of our welding fab programs, our steel fabrication programs, and our straight welding programs that we have in the province. So you can see that that happens to be our St. John shop for steel fabrication, but we also train welders in there. And you can see the type of equipment that was used. There's all kinds of very large pieces of machinery in there. There's an overhead crane. There's a set of rolls. There's all kinds of um, cutting and shaping tools that one would use. Welding is really a small part of that process. So it's um, kind of a very interesting thing. There are a couple of things that I want you to ask me questions on later. One of them that Adam, one of the pieces that Adam got into there was becoming a Red Seal, a qualified Red Seal um, uh, journeyman. And I need to talk to you a little bit about that. And, the other thing you saw were women in the program, which was pretty interesting. And I do want to get into that a little bit. Um, and just, some, if you have any questions about that overall experience, that would be perfect. So in a nutshell, that just gives you that particular student experience that we're talking about. Now, I also while we're in the first part of this, I also want you to hear from a couple of employers. One of them is Burke Industrial um, in St. John, and we'll just back to that famous drop box. For some reason, my um, shares seem to be very slow with respect to this, but we'll get there. So this particular video is on Burke Industrial. It's a very large fabricating company that works out of St. John. And within this video, it gives you a really good idea of what the working world looks like in the metals processing, welding, fabrication side. And you'll also hear um, uh, the owner of the company talking a little bit about the workforce that comes out of NBCC and how they certainly value it. So.
Al,
Yep.
there's no sound from the video. I'm not sure if you got my message on the
Geez,
other
I wonder
chat.
why.
I don't know. Did you unplug your headphone maybe? Just while the video is playing? Just try that. No?
Just provided by the college.
Okay, now sounded like we had a little bit of a sound problem in there. Is that true?
There was a little bit of sound coming through for a second. I'm
Yeah,
not sure if it was when you unplugged your headphones or
just toward the end of it.
yeah, towards the end.
Yeah, that probably was it. Hey, my uh, headphones are probably interfering in that. So what was the first video like if we're going through this?
There
Sound or
was
no?
no sound at all. And
Okay, so wonder if I should just play that first video again because I want to talk about that a bit. And
okay,
we'll try and unplug and see if we can get it to go.
yeah, let's try that.
Yeah, I'm just going to turn up my own volume here as well. So see if we can't do this.
Thanks for your patience, folks.
Yeah, just some technical difficulties. So we're going to try the Dropbox video again. For some reason, we're losing sound, but I want to try the steel fabrication one again, just because there's some interesting stuff in there for you. So we'll unplug and go.
Still no sound, Al.
No sound?
No.
I guess we're not going to get. I guess we're not going to get that sound, but at least you saw a little bit of pictorial of what's going on there. So, so I'm just going to move over to a little PowerPoint presentation, and we're going to talk a bit about each program, which I think will be okay. And then we can start discussing a little bit about any questions you might have. Here we go. So, as I mentioned earlier, our programs are housed at most of our NBCC campuses. This happens to be one of the buildings at our St. John campus. And at this particular campus, we have welder, steel fabricator, and machinist. The steel fabricator program has been, we're actually not going to run it in this campus this year, but we are running it in the Moncton campus just to just for some information on your part. Now, first of all, the welding program that we have is typical of our trades programs. It encompasses about 36 to 40 weeks, and students are taken through pretty much everything that you could imagine in terms of coursework that would make you a welder. When we talk about shop time versus how much time you might spend in a classroom, you might expect probably we'll say about 40 to 50% classroom time, learning the theory that goes behind our welding programs, and about 60% actual shop time. And some of the courses that I've listed here, or at least the topics, take you through things like basic bench work that goes with the process of welding. We're very big on shop safety, so as a student enters any of our trades programs, we get at least a couple of weeks up front of actual safety, looking at the tools, the safety gear that a welder has to actually wear, and also the work safe in the booth on the welding process part of it. Some of the major areas that we do coursework in would be in what's called oxy-fuel cutting, which is cutting metal with a torch properly. And there are 3 different kinds of metals related, welding related processes that we teach. One of them is shielded metal arc welding, or SMAW as the industry term is. We teach gas metal arc welding, the industry term being GMAW, and flux core arc welding, FCAW. So basically it's from the type of stick welding that you normally see to types of wire feed welding that one would see out there. Now, there's a couple of core courses that go in with our welding programs and our fabricating programs. One of the big ones is blueprint reading. This is where you learn how to actually read project parameters and build from those blueprints. We're all kind of familiar probably with house blueprints. We've seen how houses and floor plans are drawn for house construction. Well, this is our version of it. So the blueprint reading that we would look at would be, the types of welds and beams and copes and that sort of thing that a welder would have to know. So at the end of this type of course material, you'd be able to roll out a set of plans on your workstation and build whatever part the client would certainly want from you. The next course there is Metallurgy, which is kind of the science of metals. So we would teach a whole lot of information on different types of metals, like steel versus iron versus aluminum versus different types of alloys that one might have to weld, and all the heat that goes with each of those in the welding process, high carbon and low carbon steels. So we give our welders a really good appreciation of the science behind weldings as well. We also teach math. One of the really important things for welders and fabricators to be able to do is to lay out projects, and believe it or not, it's using that geometry that you probably learned in high school or grade school, where you use angles and triangles and circles, and you actually, from a set of blueprints, actually lay out in full scale on sheets of steel, the types of projects that you might want. So then there are other related subjects in there. One of the more important ones would be our communication courses, where we teach you a little bit about job searches and a little bit about the communication aspects of the welding field. So you get a little bit of that softer side of the business. And near the end of the welding program, the year welding program, we offer a 3-week work practicum where in partnership with our students, we find employers who want to host our students on during that work practicum. So these are real-time work practicums. These aren't where you go in and watch somebody work. This is where you go in and grab the tools and put on the gear and you weld for the client. So we like to kind of talk to about these in terms of it being a really great 3-week type of job interview, and a chance for you to showcase your skills and a chance for an employer to really have a look at you. So that's essentially what would happen over the 36 to 40 weeks that you would take in a typical welding program at NBCC. So at the end of it, you would receive that NBCC certificate for a graduation from us, but you also have the ability to write your level 1 or your block 1 of the apprenticeship process. And I'm going to talk quickly about that later because it does cover all of our trades that we offer in the metals processing side. This is just a shot of our Moncton welding shop. It's a state-of-the-art facility that was built in probably 2011 by the time we commissioned it. And all of the piping that you see up in the top is part of a state-of-the-art ventilation system in here, so that when we have all 62 of our welding booths going full blast, you can breathe certainly air in here that's just very pure. So we're very conscious about our our duty of care to our students in terms of safety and ventilation, and this is a really prime example of that. So that basically covers what you see for our welding shop. You see in this thing, there are a few tools around here. This is this little green thing over on the right-hand side is called an iron worker, and it will punch holes and cut metal so that so that you can fabricate certain portions of what you might want to do. There's also metal working saws and punches and band saws and all the equipment that one needs as a welder to do the work that you need to do. Okay, now related fairly closely to welding is Welder Metal Fabricator, and we offer this in 2 campuses, one in Miramichi and one over in Woodstock. And these are sort of a hybrid course that sort of hits the middle ground between a pure metal or steel fabricator and a pure welder. So we do a lot of welding, but also a lot of fabrication in this. So some of the coursework is pretty similar. So I'm not going to go quickly, go over it again, but there's the same learning to weld, welding and cutting, material handling, fitting, blueprint readings there again, a little bit more drafting in this one. Math is still there, and all that workplace safety practices there as well. And at the end of the 1-year period, there's a workplace practicum, and all of that leads to a graduation certificate and the potential to write your level 1 apprenticeship exam. So you see in this picture that this fabricator has created a plate here that has some fairly large holes in it, and there seems to be a piece of tubing coming out of that. Now, what that project is actually part of a Point-Lepreau generating station mock-up that we were asked to do a couple of years ago when Point-Lepreau was refurbished. So we did a fair bit of work for Point-Lepreau out of the Moncton shop and the St. John shop. So what you see sticking out in that tube is would actually be like a steam tube that would be inside that nuclear power plant. So we really get into some really interesting projects inside of our coursework. And again, just a quick look at steel fabrication here. So this is the third of the three programs that are related. We have welding, welder fitter, and then the third one is steel fabrication. Again, many of the courses are very similar in terms of blueprint reading and material preparation and mathematics and all the welding courses. But this one is very heavy in looking at fabrication equipment. And even though you didn't hear the sound in my little video at the start, there was quite a display of fabrication equipment that we do utilize for our steel fabricators and welders. What you saw in that video was a fairly large set of plate rolls, shears, machines that bend metal, very heavy metal, machines that cut it. We have a CNC cutting table that will process whatever you might like. So, so these steel fabricators would probably work on projects like maybe shipbuilding. A lot would be employed, for example, down in the shipyards in Halifax. And many companies like the Burke Industrial Company that you saw would you know, hire a lot of our steel fabricators. So those are the three, and the flavor is slightly different between the three, but they all work in the field of welding and fabrication. And there's another shot of a fabricator on a large hanger. You see this U-shaped hanger that's here. Again, that was part of the Point Pro generating station. This would have hung some very large steam tubes up in the air, which is kind of neat. So all of these pieces have to be fabricated and then put in place in the final construction. So related to those three programs is another very fascinating 2-year program that is actually a technology within the metals processing group. It's Welding Technology. So it's 2 years in length, and the entrance requirements are a little different for this one. Now, entrance requirements for our our 1-year trades programs are by and large, high school graduation and in the maths that we would want at maybe the grade 10 level. But this one's a little different. The entrance requirements are more towards an academic credential. So we would want math 11A and B, I think, and an academic diploma, because this leads to certification as a welding engineering technologist, and that's a very unique lifestyle and a unique career. So the specialty in this area would be really under the welding inspection methods. That's the first course that's there. So it would get into non-destructive and destructive testing of metals. So under non-destructive testing, this program would get into X-raying, ultrasonics, looking through metals to see if there's any flaws or problems within welds. Welding technologists would take portable equipment out and verify work that a welder had done in a shop, would be in on any kind of forensic thing that might happen if there was a failure in a building. And as a matter of fact, some of these techniques are used, for example, in plane crashes to see if there was any pre-existing cracking in any elements that would be there. So we learn all about the non-destructive examination. Destructive testing has more to do with sawing out a piece of a structure and actually testing the metal in the welds by destroying something, which is also very appropriate for certain parts of it. The picture here shows our welding robots. So we actually get into robotic automated welding in this, which is kind of something that a welding technologist does. And automated welding can include a robotic welder like this, or a submerged arc welder, which means nothing to you, but it's a pretty interesting piece of equipment. And it could be also an an orbital TIG, which is a computer-controlled remote welder that, say, for example, we wanted to weld something inside of a power plant, a nuclear power plant, and the radiation was pretty high. We could kind of set that unit up inside the plant and actually run it remotely to weld a crack or whatever that might be. So this is very much testing, quality assurance, 3D modeling, engineering drawings, metallurgy at a little higher state. There is lots of welding in it as well, because we expect our welding technologists to learn how to weld. So actually in that first year, there's probably half the time that's spent in the welding shop learning welding and fabrication. So it's a challenge, but the jobs and rewards are huge. Welding technologists are employed out of Moncton all over North America. So something interesting to look into if you're so interested. So I was talking about that Point Lepreau thing, and this project is part of one of those projects. This is in our welding shop, and it shows you all the steam tubes and the framing and everything that would go into a portion of a nuclear power plant. And 3 or 4 of these units were shipped off to Point Lepreau for use down there. So very interesting project for students. Took us about 6 months, and it involved all our fabricators, all our welders, and our welding technologists provided the overseeing of the whole project and all of the destructive and non-destructive testing that had to go on before we could release it. So neat stuff. So now we're going to change a little bit here and talk a bit about our machining programs, of which we have kind of 2 of them on the go. We've got Machinist, which is pictured here, which is a traditional type of machining. And then we have CNC machining, which is kind of neat. That involves actually 2 years at NBCC. But the Machinist program here is pretty high-end machining, but it's very manual. Students have to really learn a lot about precision, machining with precision, measuring with precision, and creating parts and pieces that fit into other parts and pieces with zero tolerance. So it's a pretty fascinating thing. So the Machinist program is offered in Moncton and St. John. So again, we start with workplace safety practices, layout and bench work, which is the basic tools to go in with a machinist. Then you'll learn about lathes, which is what you're seeing in this picture, saws and drill presses, milling machines, grinders. There's 2 or 3 weeks of welding within this program, because sometimes machinists have to weld broken parts and then machine them back down. Some in-depth metallurgy, again, mathematics, blueprint reading. There's a physics course in this one. It's Newtonian physics, which means like, mechanical type physics, gearing, pulleys, that sort of thing that a machinist has to know about, and communication. And then 1 course in computer numerically controlled manufacturing at the bottom there. And just another shot. This one is this is actually a feeder tube for that Point Lepreau project. This is where the nuclear rods would have gone inside of this tube to provide power to the plant. And we built 33 of these out of 350 that went inside the plant. So we were a pretty busy shop for that time. So here's just another shot of a so-called vertical mill. The last one was a horizontal lathe. This is a vertical mill, and you can see this student milling out a part using a sort of a vertical tool to do that. So from there, we move on to a CNC Machinist program. Now this one, it ends up being 2 years, because you have to do our 1-year program first before you can qualify to get into this. And this one is just a total 180 degrees from what you just saw in terms of the manual types of machining that goes on. This is CNC stands for computer numerically controlled machining, And this student here, you can see the machine that he's running in the background is a vertical mill, but he's programming it with a programmable controller. Now, these students would spend 50% of their time learning three-dimensional programming software and 3D drawing software, and shipping those programs off to one of our 10 machines that we have, and then actually cutting the part simply by computer control. So this is a totally hands-off operation, and that machine in the background might be set up to run what we would call 3 or 4 different axes. So all the tooling would kind of rotate around the part and would actually build it. So it's a total departure from machining and well into the world of IT. So it really interests a lot of people, and the jobs here are just amazing for CNC specialists. The New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and PEI all come to this program for this workforce because there's a very large, believe it or not, aircraft parts manufacturing industry that's in all 3 provinces, and they rely on us to supply that workforce. So the jobs are there. All of our graduating classes out of this program are snatched up as soon as we can do it. So again, here's a little bit of CNC. This is a program called Multicam, and you can see they're developing some material so that it can be programmed in to build some of these pieces that you see on the screen. So we have a very high-end computer lab. Most of our programs require the use of a laptop, but this one we have to supply the units because they're just a little too need a little too much math processing for your average laptop. So we do that. So yeah, that's it. And there's just another shot of a couple of the CNC machines that we have. So I said I'd talk a little bit about apprenticeship, and I'm going to do that, and then we'll entertain some questions. Apprenticeship is the way that tradespeople get licensed. And we like to call it around here the other 4-year degree, because you can take about 3 to 4 years after NBCC to actually become what's known as a red seal or licensed tradesperson. So at Moncton, we offer apprenticeship after the fact in welding, in machining, in steel fabrication, and indeed there are other apprenticeships around the province in things like sheet metal, carpentry, electrical, plumbing. All of those areas are apprenticeable trades. So essentially, apprenticeship becomes, we'll just start with what it is. It's a way of working and learning towards a master type of designation in the field of your choice. So apprenticeship is generally described by you or a person who wants to be apprenticed working for a company, and then at some point during the first year being released to do about 6 to 9 weeks of schooling back at good old NBCC, and you write an exam. And then you go back for another year with the company, and you come back to NBCC, you do not do another 6 to 8 weeks, depending on what your block is. You write an exam, then you go back to your company. Some trades run at 3 years of apprenticeship, some go 4, depending on how difficult they are. But at the end of that process, you write a national red seal exam in the trade of your choice. So you've actually done NBCC, and then you've done the apprenticeship blocks. You've successfully passed them. You've worked in the field for, up to maybe 7,000 hours, which could represent 4 years. And then you write that red seal exam. So that gives you your qualification, and nobody can take that away from you. And that's why we call it the other 4-year degree, because while all your friends are doing their arts degrees and wondering about where they're going to work, you're working and living and getting paid to actually become a master at your chosen profession. And most companies who will sign up apprentices, and most do, will also link their pay to where you are in terms of your level of apprenticeship. So, for example, you might get a starting job with as a welder, you're making maybe $18 to $21 an hour, and then when you become a second year apprentice, that might go up by a couple of dollars for the next couple of years, and then by the time you're a red seal welder, you could be making $28 to $32 an hour depending on where you're working. So it's all linked to that, and we're not talking 35-hour weeks here. We're talking, in many companies, as many weeks as you can possibly take, so 40, 45, it's not weeks, but hours, 40 to 45 hours a week. So the whole process is pretty good if this is what you actually want. So there we go. There's our little bit of a talk on what we have for NBCC. Let me just stop sharing here and get rid of some of this stuff. Okay, so how are we doing for questions? Is there anything in the chat, or do we just want to open it up?
Well, there's nothing in the chat.
Okay.
So maybe we just open up the floor.
Sure.
So if there's anybody, if any of the participants have any questions, now's your time. Now's your chance to ask Al directly. And just make sure your microphone is on. And
so I want to hear from some of you in terms of what you want to do and what brought you to metals processing.
maybe they're all a little shy.
Yeah, that's a lot to chew on, when you start looking at all the possibilities in metals processing here.
Yeah. Well, it was a lot of information, and if nobody has any questions, do you have anything else you would like to add, Al?
If you want to reach out to me, other than this little session, I'll give you my email address, and if you have any particular questions, you can certainly reach out that way. So
I'll
get a
type it in
pen.
the chat.
What's that? You can put it in the chat?
Yep.
So, okay. You have mine anyway, don't you? Or?
I do.
Okay, so we'll do it that way.
Okay.
So feel free to ask anything you like. The other thing that we certainly can do, even though we're sort of at the end of our little pandemic that we've had, we'd love to entertain any of you in terms of a tour at any of our campuses. Social distancing rules in place, of course, but we can certainly do that and show you real time what we actually have to offer. We can certainly set you up with an instructor to take you through the process. Now, that's another interesting thing. As we slowly open up at the present time, we're delivering our trades programs both virtually and on campus. So the experience as we end the year is we're doing basically our shop portions of our courses here, which translates into about 3 days a week on campus and about 2 days a week online. Now, it looks very favorable for the fall. Cautiously, we are looking at offering 4 days on campus, which means that there'll be certainly all of our shop time would be there, and probably 1 day of delivery on campus, because sometimes you just need to learn by being with an instructor, and then probably one day online. if we can work that out. So that should be the fun part. So we're getting there.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
just adding your email.
perfect. So I guess we're either doing a really fantastic job or we put everybody to sleep. What do you think it is, Katie?
I think we're doing a good job.
Somewhere in the middle, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even with the technical difficulties, I think
Yeah, well, that
recovered
yeah,
well.
yeah, well,
It happens.
it's too bad. It'd be nice to see those videos, but certainly both, like the Burke Industrial one is a real testament to NBCC grads, because Burke basically says in that video with Burke Industrial that they basically can't do without us. They rely on NBCC to develop their workforce, which is right where we need to be.
Yes, you're right. So I've added Al's email there in the chat, and just a little note. And if anyone has any questions that come up after we're done, or if you prefer to ask in private, just give him a shout, and he'll get your questions answered. So, is there anybody else with any questions at all before we finish?
Last chance.
Last chance. Okay, well, I want to say thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight, and we hope that you enjoyed the session, and I hope you found it informative. Again, if any questions pop into your head after after we're done here, just reach out to Al. And thanks so much, Al, for your wisdom and expertise.
And I hope to hear from a few of you if you want to pursue this, because there's some pretty great careers down the track here for you.
Yes, it looks like a really awesome career trade to be in. Okay, so with that, we'll say good night, everybody.
Okay, good night.
Have a good evening.